Welcome in. It is Wild Card Weekend. The playoffs are live in the National Football League, and Pro Football Today on SportsGrid has you covered today and tomorrow and Monday. Honestly, at this rate, might as well do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, fellas. Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, and Joe Lisi with you once again. 2 games today, both in the AFC, 3 games tomorrow. And, of course, again, we'll have you covered for the Monday Nighter, which closes out the weekend, Eagles-Bucks. But, Joe, a lot to get to here. The wild card round is upon us.
This is what it's all about, guys, and a rematch of both of these games, right? You talk about Houston and Cleveland. This game played out about 4 weeks ago. Joe Flacco stepped up. They win that ball game on the road 36-22. And this game, in terms of Kansas City and Miami, was played in Germany. Kansas City jumped out to a 21-0 first-half lead, held on 21-14. There's going to be some elements in the mix in Kansas City tonight, Donnie, but we should see some great action a little bit later today.
Yeah, it's going to be great, too, because you have that first game to kick it off where everybody's excited for Super Wild Card Weekend. You also take a look at the Houston Texans here. What an upstart season for D'Amico Ryans. That head coach are doing an unbelievable job. C.J. Stroud has been absolutely wonderful as a rookie quarterback. Looks like they found their franchise guy. But also on the other side of the spectrum for the Cleveland Browns, what they have now found in Joe Flacco, the old veteran here, dialing up deep passes left and right, multiple touchdowns every time he takes the field. That game will be played in the dome environment, but I really can't wait to watch it play out. And the one thing I'm going to say is I'm actually glad I'm not in attendance tonight for the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs. Frigid temperatures. It should be so much fun to play out. But some people maybe not being able to watch it on Peacock. I'm watching. I'll tell you that.
It is incredible, the whole Peacock thing. I have the Peacock, so it's all good. I'm sure there's a lot of signees tonight.
Yep.
I am sure. We'll bring our radio audience into the fold. Appreciate all those stopping by across the SportsGrid network, including Sirius XM Channel 159, listening to Pro Football Today with Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, and Joe Lisi. I do wonder if the Chiefs were like, you know what? We're actually good on home field advantage. Let's play this game in South Beach tonight. The 4.5-point spread has been a climbing number in KC's direction, and that one shop has actually now touched 5. A lot of Chiefs' confidence is checking in. Now, the total, and this is not the total of the weekend, but it's one of the two, the game tomorrow, which we will get to, of course, Bills-Steelers, with all of the weather. And that 44 number has finally come down all the way to 43.5, a little bit of movement. The context, though, that I will provide is this game that played earlier in Germany was lined at 50.5 for a total. So I know there is why is this number not moved? It has moved. They were well aware it was going to be very cold. I think still, if you put a game between these two offenses with the talent that we anticipate, if you drop this to 39, you're going to get about 100% of the bets on the over in this football game, Joe.
That's understandable. Again, you look at the comparison to Buffalo and Pittsburgh tomorrow, that total's in the area of about 33.5 now because of the bad weather. But again, both offenses, in my opinion, want to push tempo. I know the rushing attacks will be prevalent, Isaiah Pacheco and Devon Achane for Miami, respectively, but both quarterbacks have to have success. If whichever quarterback does have the most success in terms of this ball game, ultimately, in my opinion, will win this matchup. I do expect this game to potentially go over the total. You look at Kansas City, and you brought it up in regards to home field advantage, Kev. Since 2020, Kansas City is 25-9 at home in Arrowhead, but only 5-4 this year. Lost 4 games. Very difficult matchups, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Las Vegas, and week number 1 against Detroit, Donnie. They only lost those games by an average margin of defeat of 3.5 points per game, but maybe a little bit of a weakness for this team entering this ballgame and for Miami as well. Step-up spots have not been good for the Miami Dolphins, especially on the road. Look at a couple of weeks ago. They lost 56 to 14 or 19 against Baltimore, got kicked in the teeth.
And you're taking a look at this game because so much of the focus, and rightfully so, going to be on the weather. I mean, we're looking at apocalyptic temperatures here. Top 3 in the NFL, the coldest games that we've ever seen are going to be played out. But let's separate that here. What did the Kansas City Chiefs do well last week? Absolutely nothing. But they did well by taking a bye week, which was exactly what you're supposed to do. The Miami Dolphins, back-to-back weeks, suffering defeat here, where they could have been the number 1 overall seed, where they were never going to leave South Beach. And now you find yourself on the road in Kansas City. But let's get to the injuries here. Pacheco's going to be back on offense, full go at running back. That's not the case on the Miami Miami Dolphins here. Their entire defense feels like it's absolutely depleted. Raheem Mostert's supposed to come back to this football game a little bit banged up and injured, and Devon Achane, who's been battling injuries all the way down the stretch. The healthier team is the home team today in the Kansas City Chiefs.
I also thought, though, that was really relevant. Yesterday, you and I doing Moneyline together, and, we got into kind of some fun debates around the weather here. Today, you'll battle with Lisi more on this weather, and then tomorrow, again, it'll be – people are going to think we hate one another when we go through the Steelers-Billers – the Bills-Steelers game. But this is most likely the worst iteration of the Dolphins' defense we have seen all season, and that's another reason why this side continues to climb on KC. To pop back to that opening game, Houston and Cleveland, the fact that these teams played so recently, but it is tough to know how much you can take away because – C.J. Stroud, I think the most important player on either of these two teams, was unavailable. It makes it a little bit difficult. The caveat, though, or what you would hear is, well, C.J. Stroud doesn't play defense. True. I am of the belief, I think you guys are as well, change the quarterback, everything can change. The tempo, the time of possession, and what have you. But Amari Cooper went out there and had a historic performance, one of the best we've seen of a wide receiver in the last half decade or so. 11 catches, 265 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the game. And Flacco did what he always do. Threw for a little bit over 300, multiple passing touchdowns, did turn it over because of course, and Cleveland rolled. The difference maker today, though, again, Joe, is C.J. Stroud's back for this game.
And you saw it last week in regards to the first play, right? Opening shot, 80 yards to Nico Collins, really set the tone for them to win that ball game. And when you look at the front seven of Houston, statistically very good, right? Only allowing 96 rushing yards per game. But last week we saw Jonathan Taylor rip that defense for $188 on the ground. Maybe Jerome Ford has success today. I think when you look at Flacco, guys, last 4 games that he started, he's averaged 340 passing yards per game. They're 4-0 in his last 4 starts, have won by an average margin of victory of 9.5 points per game. But I still think the rushing attacks for both teams will be prevalent. It's a playoff atmosphere, wild card game, everything on the line. I think we see a lower scoring game. Both offenses control the clock to potentially keep that quarterback on the sidelines. And whichever team can win the turnover battle, I think wins it. Ultimately, I lean to Cleveland in this ballgame.
One of those interesting caveats this weekend that we're going to take a look at across the board on Saturday and Sunday is the teams that took a de facto bye last week against teams that had to play. The Houston Texans are a young team still trying to learn how to win. That was a win and get in, which they won the division on the road. What an emotional win. And again, everybody's going to be up for the playoffs, including the crowd. But how does that young team respond now where Cleveland took that bye week, game planned all week? We'll see if it adds up. But I'm looking forward to a pretty good game there, no doubt about it, to start off Super Wildcard weekend.
Well, we will also be hitting this morning, because we have 2 games and enough time to stretch our legs a bit here, is all of the wild coaching updates that have been going on within the NFL. Belichick amicably parting ways, Pete Carroll politely being put upstairs with the front office instead of coaching, and some news this morning around the Las Vegas Raiders that Antonio Pierce is likely to keep that job with the Vegas Raiders. But up next, we get into game number 1, Texans-Browns.
Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Weiss said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, your mind. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back in. It's Pro Football Today. We dive right into game number 1. Today at 4:30 in Houston, the Texans and the Browns will meet, as this Texans team is a dog here of now 2.5 points, the total at 44.5. I want to see how much that line is kind of varying. Right now, 2 points in some spots in that total. Pretty straightforward, 44.5 anywhere I'm seeing it. When we dive into the big picture of this game, Joe, and we try and figure out who really has the advantage here and why the Browns are road favorites. One of the big things I think I come back to, and it is so remarkable that this is the case, but it's the experience advantage on the side of the Cleveland Browns. Historically, a quarterback making their playoff debut against a quarterback who is not making their playoff debut, the veteran has a big edge, and Joe Flacco has a career 11-4 ATS mark in his postseason career. This is CJ's first game. Also, Kevin Stefanski, who may or may not win Coach of the Year. Either it'll be his opponent here, DeMeco Ryans, but Kevin Stefanski's coached in the postseason before, won a playoff game before on the road in Pittsburgh. Again, Ryan's making the debut. I think the experience edge is what we're really seeing factor into this line.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the fact that Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl, even though it was years ago with the Baltimore Ravens, it's just not his first rodeo, right? And you can make the argument, and we talked about it off air as well, that C.J. Stroud has played in big games. You go back to the college football semifinal playoff loss to Georgia. It doesn't get bigger than that in regards to 100,000+ fans on a neutral field. So I expect them to be ready for this environment, but with Joe Flacco, you can maybe do a little bit more. You could go outside your comfort zone, where in terms of this ball game, Houston playing at home might potentially come out a little bit tight. Maybe the game plan is a little bit conservative in terms of this matchup early on. I still think they want to run the football with Devin Singletary, sustain the clock early on, jump up maybe 7-0, 3-0. I don't think they want to get into a shootout with Joe Flacco, because ultimately that has been the strength of this offense over the last 5 weeks. You look at Joe Flacco, the last 4 games, guys, he's averaged 340 passing yards per game, 11 touchdowns. They didn't have a hint of this type of attack with Deshaun Watson throughout most of the regular season, right? Joe Flacco comes in, they're averaging 300 yards per game like it's chiclets. They're just putting up, 30-point performances each and every week. Now defenses have to account for not just the rushing attack where they're very good, but now the deep ball. That opens up a bunch in terms of the game plan, and that's why I give the edge, Donnie, along with the defense led by Myles Garrett, a veteran group, especially in terms of that secondary. I think that's the advantage. But I'm picking this fall game very low scoring, 23-17 Browns.
And by the way, you take a look at Cleveland, so many injuries that pop up. Late in the week, it was Denzel Ward on Thursday tweaking that knee, one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL. That would be a huge disadvantage if he wasn't there today. But it looks like all systems go. He is going to at least give it a go and start that game. That's a huge positive for the Cleveland Browns. One of those teams that you say, hey, let's take a bye week here, not get injured, and you get one of your key player injured possibly late in the week. And again, we're not talking about a Monday night football game, guys. It's a Saturday football game where you tweak that knee on Thursday. We'll see if that plays into it. But I think you have some valid points here. This is a young team here that's still trying to work its way around and win. Now, they didn't get to the playoffs by surprise. Like, oh, look at this. We flipped the coin for the last 6 weeks, and here we are in the playoffs with a home game. No, they earned it. They went out on the road last week against a division rival in a must-win football game and won that football game and made the defensive stand at the end. Here's the interesting part for me. I know Joe Flacco has been absolutely brilliant at quarterback. I do think they'll be able to throw the football, but one of the calling cards for the Houston Texans guys throughout the season was they don't really let you gash you on the ground under 100 yards per game, about 3.5 yards per carry. Last week, Jonathan Taylor went absolutely berserk going against that defense here. So if that run defense is a little bit leaky, chances are Cleveland's going to be able to exploit that as well. I like Cleveland in this game. I think the line is short here, but short in a good way for Cleveland, where you win it by a field goal, you get the win and cover, and you move on. I just trust Cleveland a little bit more, Kevin, than I do the Houston Texans.
I think the line has been difficult for me to justify because it still is Joe Flacco, who was out of the league about a month and a half ago, laying a number against – look, I know CJ's a rookie. The kid was an MVP candidate. I think if I had a ballot, I don't, but if I did, he probably would finish inside the top 5. Like, I'm crazy. I think he had a better season than Lamar Jackson. Nobody agrees. It doesn't matter. But that's how I feel C.J. Stroud, who led the league in touchdown-interception ratio, performed this year, threw for over 4,000 yards on the season. So that is a real advantage because also, I mean, Joe Flacco has 3 more interceptions on the season than C.J. Stroud, playing in a third of the football games there. And those are the things when you get into the playoffs that you worry about, right? The idea is, rookie quarterback mistakes are coming. C.J. hasn't made those mistakes. I think the key, and you talked about thinking this could be an under here, this Browns defense has to come back to life. The Browns defense went from looking historically great through the first 2 months of the season to very vulnerable during this run here that we've seen over the last month or so, really during the Joe Flacco era of this team. And again, that's the bit of worry here. I as well lean towards Cleveland. I think they have advantages in just the experience column, and I think Myles Garrett can still take over this game because, and I know it's been the case all season long, but the Texans' offensive line is still not 100%, but I'm lining this up today where this isn't, and it's rightfully so, it's a short line here. This Browns defense has to step up here today because they're going to be covering for 1 or 2 Joe Flacco mistakes.
Yeah, they can't afford the big play. And you saw that throughout the regular season in particular spots, right? One game early on was the 39-38 win on the road in Indianapolis, right? At that particular point, we never thought that a team potentially could put up 38 points on that secondary. Statistically, they're very good. They're only giving up 167 passing yards to opposing offenses. But look at the games at the end of the regular season. As good and as much success as Flacco's had, I mean, the Jets put up 17 points on them with Trevor Siemian. So you can't say that C.J. Stroud and this offense that's averaging 245 in terms of the passing attack can't potentially move the football. I am curious to see how Cleveland attacks it with those wide receivers because Nico Collins was a beast last week. 9 receptions, $195, had the touchdown. You're going to have to contain him in this ballgame. You have to take him away and force C.J. Stroud to check downs, Dalton Schultz, and some of those secondary wide receivers. If he's finding Nico Collins early and often, this game could fly through the total, and more importantly, the Houston Texans, Donnie, can win this matchup.
Yeah, and again, I'm a little bit opposite of you in this game. I think there's a little bit more points than less here, and I'm not saying we're going to get 60 in here, but I do think both of these teams can approach 20. But also, as Kevin pointed out, when you're taking a look at a young quarterback here, the one thing I love about C.J. Stroud, he's willing to hold the football a little bit longer to make that big play downfield, which does equate to sacks. And if you take a look at his sack numbers, each and every game it feels like it's multiple sacks against C.J. Stroud. This is one of those front sevens here that will really get after you, particularly in the last game they played. Zadarius Smith had 2 sacks in this ballgame. That's not even Myles Garrett we're talking about here, because you have to put so much effort stopping him. The other guys are able to eat. I think we're in a pretty even matchup. And again, that's why the line's 2.5. It's not 7.5 here. And also that's why the Houston Texans, I don't believe, deserve to be the favorite here, because Cleveland does have a lot of edges coming in. And I always like to talk about the rest advantage maybe being the biggest advantage in football. Cleveland's coming in this game healthy and rested and also rejuvenated. Amari Cooper had a couple hundred yards in their Week 16 matchup, banged up with that heel. So nice to take that week off and come back to this game healthy. I do think we get a bit of big plays here. Maybe, Joe, it does come down to, we see it a lot. Hey, good game flow here. Turning the football over in the red zone kills you every single time.
It does. And that total, by the way, because there's been some conversation, well, why is this number not higher?
Yeah.
The meeting 3 weeks ago was lined at 39.5. I know it went well through the number, but the point is, if I told you that they elevated a total 5 points because CJ's back, you'd say, yeah, that sounds about right. I don't think you can, 10 more points, CJ. No, that would be crazy. Well, we're at 44.5. Now, you can say the first number was wrong, and I think that's totally fair, and obviously ended up being wrong. There was 58 points in the game. The Texans didn't do anything until garbage time. Can the Browns really go that crazy again? And that's why I understand that look towards the under there. It is a bit contrarian to what we're hearing around the slate this weekend, and we'll see how that plays out. A lot of prop options in this game. We will dive into all of those as well. I do like some of these C.J. Stroud numbers here. I think David Njoku makes a lot of sense. But we're going to switch up and go over to Chiefs, Dolphins. It's going to be a cold one. We'll break it down next.
Introducing Sports Injury Central's new feature, The Injury Edge, your NFL matchup cheat sheet. See all the significant injury mismatches broken down by offense and defense to highlight where the advantages lie. All for only $2.99 a week. How can you even consider making a bet or setting your fantasy lineup without knowing the injury mismatches? Go to sixscore.com today and get this week's Injury Edge.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6 and the 7 seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. Fantasy sports today.
They were saying there's no way he could not possibly do this. He won't hold out.
Pro League Soccer powered by Marca.
Scoring teams in the league. They have 80 goals so far.
Pro Football Today.
You got to give the coaching advantage to McVay over Campbell, even though they're at home. I mean, come on.
But I think there's some interesting props in this game, but I would be cautious laying this number here with the Houston Texans.
In-game live all access.
In the NFC in terms of these wild cards and in terms of the playoff picture.
In-game live, prime time.
Rich, I don't know, man. This has just been one of those games that doesn't make a lick of sense.
In-game live, overtime.
I want to give you over 3-1 on a pretty good team. It's hard not to take some flyers.
Football full circle.
Well, NFL officials stink. They always will stink, and they'll always ruin the game. That's just part of what it is.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Pro Football Today, Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, Joe Lisi, Chiefs Dolphins. Here's the deal. It's a 4.5-point line. Total's 43.5. I'm going out of order. Weatherman DRS. Explain to us what's going on in this game.
All right, look. Many of us have never played in an event at this cold. Many of us never even walked outside in an event that's going to be this cold. So I would like to start with this. You take a look at the weather conditions here. And again, real feel. So forget about the wind chill conditions. Let's just go outside and what the air temperatures will be. At kickoff tonight, -4. By the time we get into the fourth quarter, we're looking at -6. 15-mile-an-hour sustained winds throughout the game. It doesn't mean it might blow 15 miles an hour. It means the average is 15, which wind gusts at 20, probably 25 miles an hour. That is going to affect the kicking game. But also keep in mind, Kansas City in 2016 did put in heating under their field. But we're told to believe that that's for like 20-degree weather, not -20-degree weather. So we'll see if that holds up on its end. So the simple end of this is nobody's scoring in this football game, and you got to be an imbecile to bet the over in this game. Let's start there. How about that?
No. Now that's hold on.
Yep.
That's breakdown 2. I want to quickly stay with breakdown 1. I want to quickly stay with breakdown 1. You can go to breakdown 2 in a minute.
It's getting hot.
It's going to be freezing, one of the 5 coldest games in the history of the playoffs, right? Now, when it gets that cold, it is obviously noteworthy. But rarely, if ever, would I say, hey, Donnie, it's going to be cold out. Do you like the under? You would say, I'm not worried about that.
True.
When it snows, depending on how much it snows, you're never that worried.
Yes.
The wind in this game is how disastrous relative to when usually wind becomes a big talking point in a game.
Well, if you take it, again, we'll break it down to, let's just say, Kevin, a game in September in Baltimore, 71 degrees, 15-mile-an-hour winds. I look at that and go, what does that even register? Okay, maybe it affects a 65-yard field goal out of Tucker here, and that's it. But when you're taking a look at temperatures that are below zero and it blows, like, put a fan, like, let's just say your coldest moment here and throw a fan and turn it on high in front of you. That's what you're feeling tonight. It's going to affect your sensory. It's going to affect how fast you can run. And I bring it back to this, too. You played football. You play in 25-degree weather, and you go up the middle with a carry, and you nick your pinky finger. It feels like it's going to fall off the entire rest of the game.
It does.
It's that bad.
It does. The ball feels like a rock, especially for the kickers. I mean, the kickers sell the kickers today. I'll tell you that. That is the one thing I think in the cold that potentially could factor in terms of this ball game. And the helmet, there is new technology now. The helmet back in the day when you used to wear it in sub-freezing conditions, it feels like, forget it,
Nice bike helmet.
Here's what I'll say, and we know about the Miami Dolphins in terms of cold weather environments. Yeah. What are they, 0-9, 0-10, anytime it's under 40? They do not step up in terms of any situation when it is cold weather. They haven't stepped up in terms of road environments this year. They've lost 4 critical road games by an average margin of defeat of 21.5 points per game. I'm talking about the game against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. I'm talking about the Philly game, the first meeting against the Buffalo Bills where they got boat race, and the game against Baltimore. So they have not stepped up. They've lost the last 2 ball games by an average margin of defeat of 22 points per game. Do they want to even tackle a player like Isaiah Pacheco in terms of this ball game? That is the factor that you have to take into account. I will say this. I feel that there will be points in this matchup. I do feel that Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City playing at home are very aggressive. His total is 242.5. I altered him up to 3.25, 325 in this matchup because I think we're going to see chunk plays. Tyreek Hill has a number of 86.5. I think he gets through that. I will just say this. With all the negativity surrounding the cold weather in terms of this ball game, we've seen this number get hit down to 43 and bounce back up over 44, 44.5 respectively. We've seen Pat Mahomes' number 245.5. Why isn't it 180? Why isn't Tua at 200? I mean, he threw for 100. Tua's last 4 games. I mean, the last time I did it, I got to look. When was the last time Tua had a 300-yard performance? You know, it's been a long period of time. This offense has not resembled that, and yet we have similar numbers of where they were when they were hitting on all cylinders back in like late October. Buy, alt. I'm going over 53 and a half in this ball.
Here is for me where the dust settles. Right, the weather is, of a rarity. Right, once every 8 years type of weather you'll see in the postseason. Maybe even less frequent than that. But the total has dropped significantly from where this would be if we were in South Beach. If Miami was home for this game, this total would be
51 and a half.
I tend to agree. So this is kind of, for me, this is where I think you kind of have to talk this out. Are we sure that it being this cold is worth a touchdown to the number? Or, for those that like under, Donnie, do you think that this type of cold is worth 10 points to a number, 12 points to a number? Because that's what you need to believe to continue to sell under on this number, I think.
I think it's a touchdown. I think it's a touchdown difference, which you take a look at the opening numbers here. Let's just pull FanDuel right here, 47.5. We now sit at 43.5. I honestly believe this number should be around 40.5 or 39.5. And it's not to say, again, that these two offenses can't get there. Those numbers are there for a reason. We get it. But also, you can't over-adjust those numbers so crazy where you tune into this football game at the end of the first quarter, it's 14-7, and the total's 33.5. Now, look, I don't think it's going to get that way, but the way I think both of these teams are going to attack, the Miami Dolphins probably gain a benefit here. Because quite frankly, I'll tell you right now, if this game was played in the 60s in Kansas City, I would have Kansas City, if it was still -4.5 or -5, all over Kansas City in this game. Because I think there are so many avenues you can pursue to dominate that Dolphins defense that is so injured. But I look at it this way and say, what is your best form of running today? Isaiah Pacheco should have a great day on the ground. No linebackers, banged up defensive line. He should roll, but also from a Dolphins perspective, you're not 100% on offense, but you certainly can turn around and say, hey, offensive line, give me a good push-up here. Let's see what we can do. I think it's just going to be a lower-scoring game, not because of the actual, let's just say opportunities, I should say. The gameplay for me just says, like, you know what? We're going to get a lot of 11-play drives, 68 yards, and then maybe you get held to a field goal, and that's all you need in this game.
I do think the interesting thing, and this is kind of the case with a lot of, when things are thrown off, the idea is usually offenses won't be able to do anything. Like, how are the offenses going to be fine? But if it's freezing and nobody wants to be out there, well, that is advantage Isaiah Pacheco, who runs out of his mind every single play of the game. The advantage is super corny. The guys who want it more. That's Kelsey and Tyreek to me, quite frankly. Tyreek going back to Arrowhead, Kelsey knowing that he's had a down season and staring his NFL career kind of in the face. The fact that Travis Kelsey has to let people know, I am coming back next year, or lets you know that sooner than later, the answer will be, I am retiring and getting, set to ride off into the sunset. So I tend to agree still with Joe that this leans towards the over. But as far as the side goes, this is the incredible thing about the Miami Dolphins. The Chiefs are 1-4 against playoff teams this season, straight up. They have lost 3 of those games at home. The Chiefs have been about Buffalo, Philly, and Detroit. They lost all at home, right? They had to lose at Green Bay. Here's the problem. Who's the one team they were able to beat? This useless Dolphins team that cannot beat anyone good. The Dolphins are not just 1-5 straight up against playoff teams. They arguably didn't cover any of them, depending on what line you bet them against Dallas. 1.5 they covered, 2.5, which was widely available for a lot of the week. They didn't even cover. 0-6 that would put them against playoff teams. All week long, I have been leaning towards Miami plus the 4.5. I think that is still, when it's all said and done, what I like here. But it is remarkable for Kansas City during this down season, and it is undeniably a down year as the 3 seed with 11 wins underneath their win total. It is a down year for the Chiefs. They have not beaten any good teams. But the Miami Dolphins, who are arguably not even a good team and just beat up on bad teams, which is what makes this spot so interesting. And you've always talked about this, Donnie, where I sit up and I go, you know what? Give me Chiefs minus 4.5. I can live with being wrong on Mahomes. Where you take the Dolphins outright and you go, yeah, my God, I just bet to win at Arrowhead against Patrick damn Mahomes with what we've seen this season.
Well, that's the problem. Is do you believe in Tua to make enough plays on the road to bail out his offense and potentially steal this ball game? And you're right about Patrick Mahomes and this offense not looking the way they did in terms of years past. Last 8 games for Patrick Mahomes, he's only averaged 240.7 passing yards per game. His total tonight is 246.5. So just think about that. I mean, that's un-Patrick Mahomes-like. This offense has not had the big play capability. And look at the quarterbacks that they did lose to at home. Jared Goff, that did at least get to a Super Bowl, right? You know, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. Do you and Aiden O'Connell, which we won't count because the defense bailed them out in terms of that ballgame. Do you believe Tua is as good as Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, or Jared Goff to pull this ballgame out on the road? Because I don't. I'm a Dolphin fan. I have to look at it realistically. Are they going to want to step up and tackle in terms of this ballgame? I believe no. Are they going to be as physical and force turnovers on the road in Arrowhead? Absolutely not. Do I give the coaching advantage of Mike McDaniel over Andy Reid in a playoff type of scenario? Absolutely not. And it comes down to Mahomes. If anybody's going to have a big game, I'm banking on that guy in terms of a do-or-die type of situation with the game and their backs against the wall to break out with a potential 30-yard performance with Tua. They have the potential, but I haven't seen it ever in a big spot. I have seen it with Patrick Mahomes, even though they're uncharacteristic this year. So give me the Chiefs. I don't love the Chiefs, but I'm leaning to the Chiefs. My best bet is the over in this ball.
And also quickly to your point on that, Patrick Mahomes, as Kevin's pointed out all year long, and rightfully so, big game runner. Big game runner in this one. Tua Tagovailoa is not a runner here. You're going to need those extended plays here I think Patrick Mahomes can give you. And also, I think rising from the grave today, Travis Kelce should have a big day today. That dump-off pass should be there all game long.
Yeah, I think the receptions would make a lot of sense. Mahomes, put that just in your pocket. Mahomes, big game runner, sell me something. But next, we'll talk about some fired and hired coaches.
Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, People are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back in. It's Pro Football Today. Pausing the game breakdowns, a lot of good stuff still to come. We're going to have a full segment to really dive into these player props. Again, Sell Me Something is going to be an exciting one, I think. We have playoff, a lot of good stuff. Let's talk some coaches, though. I think we start with the news this morning that Antonio Pierce is going to keep the head coaching job with the Vegas Raiders, was their interim head coach after they moved on from Josh McDaniels. And I don't believe this is a finally official, but it's one of those things where a lot of people are going to be in a lot of trouble if he does not get this job with the way the reporting is trending this morning. The first win that they had, and they're smoking cigars in the locker room, and I don't know how that landed for people, but for me, with the way things have been in Vegas recently, I went, he's got the job. Then there's a little dip, and I was like, I guess we'll see. They love him. And there was a report this morning, actually, just before the Antonio Pierce news came out, that Max Crosby would request a trade if they did not stick with Antonio Pierce. Well, I mean, you can they wanted him. Everybody thinks the Bisaccia stuff was a mistake. I actually thought it was fine to move on from Bisaccia, just they messed up the McDaniels portion of it. This team, paying enough money and fired head coaches, would have been, I thought, crazy to not give Antonio Pierce a season, and it looks like that's what they're going to do. In my opinion, the absolute right decision by the Vegas Raiders.
Absolutely. I like the hire, and the kids and the players fought for him from the minute that he took over. They beat the Jets. They beat the Giants.
Yeah.
They beat two divisional opponents at the end of the year. After they get shut out 3-0 in terms of Minnesota, a game that they actually covered, they step up with a 63-point performance against L.A. and beat the doors off of Kansas City in Arrowhead as a double-digit underdog. So for me, that shows that he could coach this team up. I agree. The players love playing for him. He's a defensive-minded head coach. They were disciplined as long as he builds the staff around him.
Yeah.
I think this is a great hire, and you know what? He's shown an ability to go toe-to-toe with potentially the best team in the division, which is the Kansas City Chiefs, right? As a former player, what more can you ask for?
No, and I agree with both of you here. And also, it's the only way I would disagree is it was like, hey, by the way, Insider Report said Jim Harbaugh personally called Mark Davis saying he wanted that job. And Mark's like, I think we're going to go Antonio Pierce. But you're right, like an up-and-coming coordinator. We did the retreads before. We did the television general managers out here. Why don't you just get a coach that the team is going to play for you? And you as the owner, surround him with the talent that he needs to win and the offensive coordinators with the innovative minds. Because the one thing we can watch the Raiders, they're playing very good football and meaningful football. And over the past 20 years, that actually means a lot for the Vegas Raiders because they haven't done that quite a bit all that time. I like the move here if they give it to Antonio Pierce, unless, as I said again, if it's one of those coaches that was like, hey, like Nick Saban made a phone call to Vegas, like, this is the perfect spot for me to transition back into the NFL. I'm like, no, Antonio Pierce is going to be our guy. But the argument against it, what would it be? Like, why don't you give him the job because you want to give it to somebody? No, give him the job. Let him go with it there.
Yeah, I actually don't know if there's a single person within the realm of reason. Like if Kyle Shanahan's actually, I'd love to live in Vegas.
Correct. Sean McVay, yes.
Right.
Exactly.
But to be honest, like Donnie, I wouldn't have picked Harbaugh over Antonio Pierce. I wouldn't pick Saban. I wouldn't pick Belichick. They've been down that road before, I think, is my thing, Donnie. And all the excitement. If they take Jim Harbaugh, right?
Yeah.
I think Crosby still wants out. I think Devontae Adams still wants out.
Nah.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
I do.
A lot of cachet.
I think Antonio Pierce has more cachet with these guys in this locker room because sometimes, too, and I think anybody out there watching can relate to this, you want to have fun going to work, right? Like you guys can probably tell when you watch, this is a blast. I look forward to this every time. I'm on 4 hours of sleep. Nobody cares, but it doesn't matter because this is what we're doing. And at the end of the day, these Raiders players, and they've spoken about it, were miserable going into that locker room day in and day out. Antonio Pierce makes sure that they enjoy where they are. And at some point, winning is going to come into play. But look, they were winning with Antonio Pierce.
No, they were. Look, the 4 wins under the belt. They cover against Indianapolis. They played hard. They were in almost each and every ball game. So, again, that's what you want to see from the organization standpoint, and you want to see the young players develop. Look at Zamir White comes on with, huge 100-yard performance on the road in terms of Kansas City. We saw development out of Aiden O'Connell, the rookie quarterback. So, again, not only do the players love playing for him, but the younger players were coached up by him and his staff, and it's not even his staff. So give him the full year. Give him 2 or 3 years to build this team and put his footprint on it, and then make an assessment whether or not he's the head coach. But I agree with you. Going with the retreads or, McDaniels in regards to that hire, Josh McDaniels, I thought was never a good hire for them. And they went with a retread in terms of the quarterback with Jimmy Garoppolo. At least give him an opportunity to coach his team up.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with both of you guys here. There's no detriment, or should I say downside, in hiring Antonio Pierce. Everything has been positive, and he proved it, too. He could have got the job like, hey, guys, they played hard, but we went 1-6 down the stretch. Like, I don't know. He actually played meaningful football, which includes beating the Kansas City Chiefs, which is something they haven't been able to do in a long time here. Look, the future is bright for that organization as long as the players around him commit, which they have, and also make good free agent moves and good draft picks, and they can be a winning franchise again.
So moving to the New England Patriots, there is Bill Belichick being gone, and then there's the Gerard Mayo. For me, I'll do the Mayo thing first because I actually think it's pretty quick. They were always giving the job to him. I have no idea how successful it will be. I don't really know what anybody can grade this decision on. Gerard Mayo is a defensive guy who was coaching under Bill, who's the best defensive mind in the NFL for a very, very, very long time now, or one of, I guess I could say at this point in time. A lot of people have left the Bill Belichick tree and been unsuccessful here. I believe in my heart of hearts that if they had not agreed to make Mayo the successor, they would have hired Mike Vrabel. They were stuck with the plan that they had laid out here. The grade hire here, I don't want to say whatever, but this is what their plan was. I can't knock it, but I'm hardly in love with this decision.
Give it a C. I think it's not that great of a hire, and the reason why I say that is, yes, Bill Belichick, modern day, one of the best head coaches in regards to the NFL, but he has slipped and regressed, even from a defensive perspective. I don't look at New England's defense the past 2 or 3 seasons, and I know statistically very good, but this wasn't a dominant defense. This wasn't a game changer. They weren't as opportunistic where they could take games over when their offense didn't bring their A game, and that's the biggest problem that I have with Gerard Mayo right now. If you're going to clean house or move on from an older head coach, you want to move on completely. You want new blood. The fact that Mike Vrabel was available, a former player, wasn't from that type of tree, but understands the culture in terms of winning there, I would have went or potentially said Mike Vrabel would have been a better fit. Look, this coaching staff, too, in terms of what they did with young talent, I don't think they were world beaters offensively or defensively. And if we're comparing the New England Patriots to what we saw in terms of Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas, I think it's head and shoulders. Las Vegas did a much better job coaching up the young players coming to play each and every week, even though the Patriots won 1 or 2 games down the stretch. It's just an old mindset for me, so I don't agree with Gerard Mayo as a great hire.
Feels like around 2 decades ago. This wasn't a succession plan, but hear me out on how I'm going to try to explain it. The Pittsburgh Steelers won a Super Bowl with Bill Cowher, handed it off to Mike Tomlin, who came over as the new head coach. That was a great organization with a good football team, and he took that baton and he ran with it. I do think the succession plan that's been in place for a couple of years with the New England Patriots wasn't meant to give Gerard Mayo a horrible team here coming off of a losing season. It was one of those that we probably expected, and rightfully so from New England, was they would probably get to a Super Bowl and or win a Super Bowl or get knocked out in the divisional round or have a good football team and say, you know what, my time is done here. I'm going to ride off into the sunset. Gerard, I've been getting you ready for this moment. This is a great team with a good young quarterback, and away you go, and you're going to have some success. And I don't know if that's going to be the case at this point. And I said it this week on a couple shows when we knew Gerard Mayo was eventually going to be the guy. If you think you're going to grade this guy on 2 years here in New England with that division that's set up now, with that roster you have, it almost seems like he's taking the job, and rightfully so, but he's set up to fail here.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to say, okay, hey, I won 6 games next year. Okay, it was an improvement on the previous year, but it's only 6 games. And the next year I won 7 games. They're going to try to run the guy out of town, and that's not his fault.
No.
It's not.
I would. That's a great point. It would be real. He's 37. He's the youngest coach in football. He should have the job for 5 years, unless he goes back-to-back winless seasons.
And the team says we can't play for this guy. He's terrible. Outside of that, yes.
This is a similar situation on the college side to Alabama. I'm sorry, because the New England
Alabama had a good team, though.
Yes. But what I'm saying is being in the spotlight each and every week, each and every minute in New England, it's like the Yankees. You play in New York. You go from the pinnacle, and it was acceptable because Belichick was still coaching the team. Is it going to be acceptable if they go, this is a complete rebuild? There's no quarterback. There's no elite wide receiver talent. And just look at the division as a whole. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, right? You have two, playmakers, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, right? Garrett Wilson for the New York Jets and young wide receivers, right? Miami, Tyreek Hill and Jalen. Who does New England have from an offensive perspective?
100%. But I guess my thing is the Pats have been bad for a while now. They did make the playoffs once without Tom, but they're bad. Like, the world where they're bad next year, I'm going to go, we're there. I mean, how about that?
That's how
this thing just snapped. I thought I was going down. My God. I can't believe I didn't just go all the way down. Woo!
Oh, that's too good.
I mean, that's tough.
We get a clip
Yeah, don't worry. We'll get
that
it.
happened. He tried to play it off as it didn't happen right.
What was I supposed to
gave up.
Thank God the desk is still here.
I grabbed onto it for dear life. Almost went out. My goodness.
It's almost like a
I'm going to have to call. Yeah. We've been having chair issues start to finish all season long.
God, I love
it. I just the world, though, where they win 4 games next year, and people are like, can't survive without Bill. They won 4 games this year.
I know.
So we'll see how that goes. But
go ahead. I was just going to say 3 years is the max for Jerron Mayo, I believe.
Well, it depends how successful he can be. I mean, he's going to get to draft a quarterback this year. I think the answer to that is yes. But Bill Belichick is now he's going to become a head coach. There's a lot of talk around Atlanta. I think this is a situation where there's a lot of franchises out there right now that seem to be. It looks like the guy died that opening. That's terrible. I think my goodness, what a wild 4 minutes here. I think Belichick to Atlanta is possible. I think he's waiting to see what the dust settles on these playoff teams. I think the 2 NFC East playoff teams might fire their head coaches if there isn't enough success. Actually, I think so if the Bills lose to Pittsburgh, McDermott might get fired. If the Eagles lose to the Bucs, there is reports Sirianni might be fired. And if Dallas lost to Green Bay, I think McCarthy could be out. I think Bill is just trying to see if those jobs are possible for him.
Well, I mean, Buffalo would be a good fit because you have a marquee MVP type of quarterback with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
I mean, if Nick Sirianni, unfortunately, gets let go, that's a nice situation because of the veteran offense that you have.
Yeah.
And not only that, the young defensive talent, they need a defensive mind to really coach them up. That would be a good fit. I don't see Atlanta as being a very good fit for Bill. Why? Because they have no quarterback, couldn't draft the successor to Tom Brady. You think he's going to be able to coach up a quarterback in Atlanta? And that defense is not elite by any means, so we'll see. But I think a veteran type of team, Buffalo, Philadelphia, if you're going to give that option, would be a better fit than a younger team with no quarterback.
I think the opposite here, Joe, and here's why. Bill Belichick is used to having complete front office control. You have a spiraling franchise in Carolina that doesn't have a lot to look forward to, but Bill Belichick will get a big paycheck, and they'll basically say, do whatever you want top to bottom of this organization. And also, Atlanta, I think they'll give him the keys to the franchise as well. I think they're 2 good spots for him to land. Not necessarily winning, but getting what he wants.
But that's why I think, and I don't know if I want him to be the Eagles head coach, but Howie Roseman has so much cachet. Bill would walk in and be like, listen, you're the coach of this team. I make the decisions. That's the best path to Bill being successful. We have a lot of time. We can kind of re-rack Harbaugh, Vrabel. Don't worry. I'll try not to fall out of my chair as we send you into break right here. How deep can I go? We're back on Pro Football Today. Good.
You have sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, your mind. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression, not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Last segment of hour number 1 here. Yes, it's been an unbelievable hour. It's Kevin Walsh. It's Donnie Rightside. It's Joe Lisi. A lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of game information. But most importantly here, Warren Sharp's going to bring us in here a freezing cold temperature game in Kansas City between the Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins.
The Miami Dolphins are an extremely beat-up team, but if there is one edge that they have in this game, it's the fact that they are going to be able to run the football against the Kansas City Chiefs. We talked about this even back in Christmas when the Kansas City Chiefs lost outright to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, they didn't lose the game because the Raiders were able to run successfully in that one. It was because of the turnovers that resulted in points for the Raiders. But the Raiders, because the game score was close, the state allowed them to run the football, and as a result, they poured on a ton of rushing yards. The Raiders in that game were able to run the football for 6.5 yards per carry, and the running backs totaled 156 yards at plus 0.1 EPA per rush. They had a lot of success. I think the Miami Dolphins are going to be able to do the same in this game. They just have to keep this game close enough. The Miami Dolphins have one of the best rushing attacks, and their offensive line is finally healthy. They played earlier this year, and they produced 136 yards and a touchdown on 23 running back touches. That was basically just with Raheem Mostert, though, because we did not see Devin Achane in that game. Achane is back. Mostert is a little bit banged up. We're going to need a game state for Miami to have a close game in freezing cold weather. they will be able to have success running the football. It's going to be hard for these defensive players of the Kansas City Chiefs. They ranked 28th against the run to wrap up and tackle the speed and burst of the running backs for the Miami Dolphins. But the key, again, as I said at the beginning, we have to have a game state to allow that. If the Chiefs gets up too big, you can kiss this game goodbye for the Miami Dolphins. Keep this game close, and you're going to be able to lean on your banged-up offense to run the football so that you can protect your banged-up defense.
It's a beautiful.
I know.
Thank you to Warren Sharp there on the Sharp Report. Exciting times here for hour number 2. Super Wild Card Week isn't upon us. Hour number 2 is next.